Welcome for this new episode of Let's Talk Data, presented to you by DQE. And today we are with Steve Collinge, who's an expert in the retail sector and who's with us to talk about what's going on in retail today and tomorrow. And in the first episode we did together, we looked at 5 core trends that are going to be shaping the market over the next few months. And now we have another episode to delve into one of them, which is the growing importance of data. We're going to talk about what the role of data is for retailers, how it is changing, and how maybe retailers can take advantage of these trends and make the most of this very, very precious resource. As a point of departure, could you give us a sense of the general data landscape retailers are operating within? You know, what's the situation? Is every retailer already harnessing data to the optimal capacities, or is the situation a little bit more nuanced?
If only that was the case. The retailers find themselves in the beginning of 2026 with mountains of data. For 10, 15 years now, they've had too much data to be able to use effectively for commercial decisions. So if you think about the basic data that's available, the sales data, you have product data, customer data, you have search data, so people aren't buying but they're searching. They are absolutely inundated with mountains of data from which they really should be taking insights, learnings, the test and learn we spoke about before in the earlier session. But the reality is there's too much data out there for many businesses, and very few of them are harnessing that data effectively to make the right commercial decisions every day.
All right. And maybe before we delve into what's at stake really, could we give a few hints of where is this data coming from? Because you mentioned the sales data. What else could we think about? Because there's, I agree, mountains of data coming from all sorts of places, but could we, have a short outline of where it's coming from? What data are we talking about?
Yeah, let's break that into 2 or 3 different areas. If we think about store data initially, again, it's obviously product sales through the till is an obvious one. But I work with tech businesses that are tracing consumers as they're walking around stores, what they're looking at from an eye-level perspective. It just goes on. And you walk through the back door, you've got all the logistics data and the sizes and the dimensions and everything that comes with that, and a distribution centre. So purely from a physical store perspective, the amount of data is vast. All of which, if it was accurate and served up in a very simple way to the retailers, could be using that, and you're using AI tools, most importantly, to make that business more successful. That's just store. So if you then look at specifically customer data, loyalty card data, what people are buying, when they're buying it, then you go to the websites and look at what people are searching. And then there is data available for socials to pick up on trends. What products that you sell are being seen today or surfacing through TikTok or Instagram that day? What colours of that product are being seen more over that weekend that you can then react to? Crikey, and that was 3 or 4 minutes. You know, I could talk for an hour on the data sources, and that's the scale of the problem, effectively.
I think that was the point of my question, to getting a sense of the complexity of all this mountain, this ocean of data.
And it's all valuable. It's all valuable.
Yeah.
It all adds value to the business. But there are many of those examples I gave there that retailers will be doing absolutely nothing with.
Okay. And so, I guess, we have to go into that, because you're setting the stage for a paradox here with this humongous volume of data and the little use or the erroneous use made of it. But what explains this gap, in your view? Why do we have this contrast?
when you look at sales data, it's such an obvious figure and data which is clearly used within businesses. Absolutely critical. Buying teams, commercial teams, logistics teams are reviewing and using that data all the time. And always have done. It's at the heart of this. It's the blood that's pumping through the heart of that retailer. It's what people are actually buying. It's where the money comes into the till or into the website. So that's always used. Don't get me wrong. There's more that can be used in that space, but it's taking it beyond that. And when you start moving into the other examples that I gave you, if that data is old, or if that data is incorrect, or if that data hasn't been reviewed recently and one or two errors happen, or some data is surfaced where people go, well, we know that's not right. Trust goes almost immediately. You only need one or two examples of data. It's almost like when you get you sign up for a retailer's newsletter and you get a newsletter from them that month which is completely irrelevant to you. You're never going to buy those type of products. You start to lose confidence in that retailer, and you think they don't know who I am. The personalisation is wrong. I don't want to get that newsletter anymore. And that is the risk that people working for that retailer, certainly at head office, who are there to make the commercial decisions, the confidence in the data disappears. And when it disappears, the data's not used. It can be providing the most valuable insights, but it becomes ignored because people just don't believe it.
And so let's take the perspective from within companies. As a commentator of the retail industry, you've got plenty of sources coming from these, I suppose, the leaders in the industry. And from what's coming back to you, what is preventing trust in the data? What is holding back this trust?
It's a really good question, and I think at the heart of this is who owns it.
Okay.
When you've got, going back to the examples again, when you've got data coming from so many different sources, some of which relate specifically to logistics, or some to operations, some to customers, these data sources tend to sit in many, many different parts of the business.
For example?
Well, you could have customer data sitting in marketing, for example, customer research data sitting in insights. You have data relating to product dimensions and forecasting sitting with logistics. So every department has its own set of data, and it started decades ago with simplistic data, really, but it's just got more and more complicated, more and more ways of pouring into. And that is the problem, because as a business, what do you decide? What's most important? Is it the product data that ensures that it goes simply through the supply chain, whether that's a physical store or a website, or is it actually the customer data where you're likely to get the most results? And so businesses find themselves stuck. They are owned by different parts of the business. Often they sit on sometimes different systems. Some of it's legacy data from other businesses they may have acquired, and it just becomes a massive headache for a company. And often it sits at perhaps number 5 or 6 on the priority list, when there are so many other things on that list for the retailer to focus on, and they think, well, yes, we'll use our loyalty data and we'll use our sales data, but outside of that, we're not going to use the other data because it's not good enough.
But how do you explain this? The fact that it's not top of mind, let's say, not at the top of the priority, where, I mean, we hinted at this, and I think we'll go deeper into it. The value of this resource is, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's almost limitless. So is that, where is this mindset coming from, would you say? It's a difficult question, but an open one.
I see it a lot with many retailers and merchants of all sorts of different sectors. And data management tends to sit within these areas of opportunity. But as a result of that, there are 50 things. We talked about it earlier on. There are 50 things a retailer could do, and you haven't got to do them all in one go. But because of the fact data is difficult, but if you've not got somebody on the board who is responsible for data in the business, if it sits with 3 or 4 different board members, those board members, each one may think of data in a different way in terms of the level of importance or the value it can add. And so you get this disparate view on data from a business, rather than seeing data in every way as being hugely valuable And again, with the AI tools that are available now to use that data, I think what's happened is data has moved from sort of being, like I say, fifth and sixth on the list, a bit too difficult to deal with, has, particularly with AI, it's now pushing top three. And retailers are now going, we have to sort this. We have to make it the responsibility of somebody who's going to provide the insights from this data.
And just to be clear, that goes beyond your main area of expertise, which is home improvement and gardening, and that crosses all branches of retail.
Every form of retail, and even service providers too. You don't have to be a retailer to have the kind of data that can add real value to an organisation. Retail businesses have the opportunity to be hugely reactive to trends, to what customers are looking for, but they're not. Many aren't. Many physical stores. Just think of the cost of change. Let's say you have 400 retail stores. Just think of the cost of changing 4 meters of a product to 4 meters of newer product. In all those stores, there is a huge cost. People cost, transport cost, what do you do with the product coming off the shelf? So there's a real challenge around that particular piece, and how do retailers deal with that? And yet, the retailers are able to deal with trends. So if something appears on socials over the weekend, a new colour of product B, how long will it be for the retailers in that sector to be able to pick up on that? First of all, they may not already be using the AI tools that are identifying those trends. But even if they are, what do they do with that? Can they change pages on the website? Well, they could if they wanted to. Can they source a product that's right there? So just a really good example of, retailers must be far, far more reactive. You can only be reactive if you're getting the right data at the right time and make those decisions. Otherwise, you won't even know that particular colour of something is you've got a blind spot.
Yeah. I think what's at stake, listening to you, what's at stake is this 360 view of the customer, right? In real time, not just the customer of 2012 or 1982, who might have been very relevant. But we're talking about the customer now. What does he want now? And maybe even going one step beyond, thinking, what does he want next week?
Predicting
next
it.
month.
Absolutely. The insights team of one of the biggest retailers in the UK, I was having a conversation with them, and they said their biggest challenge today is trying to understand that younger consumer. They know the over 45, over 50, because they are brand loyal and they've always bought from them. They know exactly how to communicate to them, to get them to come into store, to buy online. The challenge, again, with the younger generation, they have no brand loyalty for specific retailers because they just see some of the retailers that their parents go to.
They're mercenaries.
As expensive places for their parents shop. Why would they shop there? So taking the point back to data, when you have this flux and this change within your customer groups, or you're not even seeing what's happening with your younger customers, you have no visibility of that. They're a complete blind spot for you. But if you have data on those customers and you realise they are shopping differently in terms of maybe not going to store, they are paying differently, they're using Klarna as opposed to paying with cash or whatever it is. So much is changing, but if you're not taking the data from those customer groups, you're not going to understand what's happening, and therefore you're not going to be making the decisions that changes what's in store or what's online. Again, you end up, if you're not mining the data effectively, that equals blind spots. And as a retailer, you cannot have blind spots either with your customers or your stores or your ranging or anything. You have to have visibility every day.
Hearing you talk, I see an animal with tentacles and sensors. It must have as many sensors as possible, giving back this data in real time and qualitative data. In order to see, okay, I see this as you said, maybe on Instagram or TikTok, this trend is moving up. How can we take advantage of it in our clothing line or our gardening offer? It's creating like a flexible organization, very flexible and reactive,
constantly moving. I think of it as in a touch point. If we sat down and we had a flip chart here, and it's like, how many customer touch points do retailers have? In days gone by, it was just the physical store or some kind of advertising message to them. There are so many ways now, whether it's apps or socials or whatever it is, in a way that a retailer touches. And for every touch point, there is a data source. And so if you have, I like your analogy actually, but you're everywhere. You're everywhere learning, and you've got these kind of alerts coming in saying something's happening over here. Something's happening on a product over here that we didn't realise it's being seen. How can we use that? And imagine you had the perfect world, which is always difficult to get to, a perfect world where...
But it's good to think about,
I think
having this horizon.
A vision's important, isn't it, with everything in life, I think, but as a business particularly. So you come in on a Monday morning, there's some dashboard, and you've got information coming in here about all those touch points over the weekend that's teaching you things. Let's give a little example.
Yeah.
I worked with one business, and they were using data that was coming back from stores because they enabled customers to engage with store staff. This is like store staff being able to be on the end of a WhatsApp message for customers. Take my garden examples, So it's going to be a nice weekend and a customer wants to find out whether that store has a particular plant in the garden centre. So what this retailer does is open up the route of communication. So those customers have got the WhatsApp number of the garden centre manager. And they can manage, so have you got this plant? Yes, we have. We've got 2. Shall I put one to one side for you? Very simple use of data there. But the CEO of that business, that retailer, explained to me, he said sometimes as a retailer, it's like you're standing in the middle of a football pitch. You're standing on the centre circle. I don't know what football team you support. Tell me.
Well, unfortunately, PSG. I'm from Paris.
Okay.
So. What about you?
Well, my sons both support Arsenal.
All
but
right.
I struggle a bit with that. But so I'm a West Bromwich Albion fan, which I just live with pain for many years. But let's not go there now. So as a CEO, you're sitting. It's a PSG ground. You're standing as a CEO in the centre circle, and there are how many in the stadium? 60,000.
Yeah, around this number.
Let's say there's 60,000 people, and you're standing in the middle, and there are 60,000 people talking in that stadium. And because you're on the centre circle, you cannot hear a single thing they're saying. You can hear this rumble all the time.
The noise.
You hear
Coming out.
all this noise going on, but you can't distinguish a single word or a single message from a single person. What data enables you to do is hear every conversation that's happening about your business. And what you want to know is see everything and hear everything that's happening about your business. The good stuff, the bad stuff, the interesting stuff, the trends. And if you engage with the right businesses that provide that cleansing of the data and then the data that comes through on a Monday morning, you've got all those insights there. And then what were people saying about us over the weekend? What sales went up? What were we out of stock of? And it completely changes the decisions, the commercial decisions that retailers make when you've got that level of quality data coming through to you.
So that's one key part of the story. And I think that there's a related part that is AI, right? I mean, if we talk about this 60,000 people around me, I don't expect someone to manually transcribe all these conversations and find the patterns in there.
No.
So, yeah, AI is probably playing a key role as well, right? In this reshaping of retail around new or better data sources.
That is the game changer. Previously, businesses would try and do their best to aggregate data into some forms that provide the insights. What you have now is obviously AI tools that can very, very rapidly identify what you're looking for. So one of the tech businesses that I work with, they do that social sourcing. So you give them a brief, say, I'm looking to find out what's happening in this space, in these products. What are people saying? And it goes out and it searches socials. It searches other sources as well. So it can not just the likes of obviously TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, things like that for different generations, but where it can, it's also searching within company WhatsApp or all sorts of everything else, bringing everything back. And that is the game changer, whether it's what are customers are doing, whether it's forecasting, when humans forecast, the one thing you can be absolutely certain of is we'll get it wrong because, we're not looking back 20 years of data and bringing in all the seasonal changes or the weather. If you think about the garden industry again, that business can live or die based on good weather or bad weather. So every year...
you better know what the weather is going to be.
And of course you don't, and you can't. And therefore you can't order what you ordered last year because you ordered last year when there were 12 weeks of sunshine and it rains. And, so every time you look at this, humans are pretty poor at big chunks of data and taking anything from, which goes back to your point earlier. Why don't we do it at the moment? Because we're a bit rubbish at it and it's too difficult. AI then identifies those trends and presents them to you in a way which you can use.
And so building on this point, because as you said, we've talked a lot about this, the status quo of, the challenging task of dealing with this mountain of data.
Yeah.
And so in your experience and the feedbacks you might have been getting from in other industry experts, how should retailers go about shifting their vessel, these huge boats, towards this horizon, this vision we talked about of what I call the sensitive, responsive octopus.
Yes. Yes.
How do you do this? What are the? Is there a roadmap? Would you say?
There's not a roadmap because I think it can be different by sector, but without question, it starts with the ownership of data. It starts with we're only as good as yesterday. We're only as good as the last 6 months or 12 months. We now need to be preparing ourselves for the next 12 months rather than relying on historical data all the time. And that becomes, that changes the way that you think about it. If a business decides, no, we have to now trust the data. And if it makes that decision because they see that as the key point of difference for them versus their competitors, then what you tend to see, first of all, you see data ownership coming through to a single point. And it is always a board role that has ownership of that data. They're called all sorts of different things. Chief Technology Officer.
Chief Data Officer.
Chief Data Officer. Okay. Sometimes everything is seen as customer data, whatever form it is, because ultimately the customer is at the end of that process. So it sits under the customer data manager or whatever it is. But that role then starts writing the data strategy. Often businesses don't have a data strategy. They have data and they use it, but there is no data strategy. Once you start bringing in the right roles, very, very experienced people who have done this before across different businesses, then you write a strategy. And of course, with every business, a strategy then leads to actions and specifics and investment, and everything comes down from that. But it can only start when the company has made the decision to say, we are not learning from our data, and we absolutely have to, and therefore we need to increase the prominence of this up to top 3 for what we're going to focus on in 2026.
In the sectors that you supervise, that you look at, have you seen some interesting strategies in terms of, as you mentioned, data strategies? Have you seen interesting ways of coordinating these maybe siloed data sets into one coherent, cohesive roadmap or blueprint?
I've seen lots of bad examples.
Okay.
I've seen lots of lost...
They're interesting as well.
I've seen lots of lost opportunities where you think, why aren't you reacting? You know that's happening. You know that's a trend. Everybody knows that's a trend. You ask anybody, you know it's a trend. Why aren't you doing it? Why is it not on the website at least? Or why aren't you talking about it? So many examples of lost opportunity. If you want an example of a business that has got it absolutely right, and you cannot look away from what Walmart is doing at the moment. Whether it's the fact that they have used AI to cleanse and identify 850 million product data points, or whether it's the fact they've got chatbots that they've trained so you can ask it a question. So just verbally responding to a human question about where a product is in store or something like that. So you're filling the gap. We talked about it in the earlier podcast that we did, which is the important role of people. Well, AI can support that whether it's a chatbot, whether it's something in store that enables to answer customers' queries, customers' questions. Because most of the products we're buying, like I said before, are relatively infrequent purchase, and we need help and support on that. So there are endless examples from Walmart of where they have seen that this is key to them staying ahead of Amazon, not letting Amazon take anything else from them, any share from them. And of course, they sit there thinking the key differentiator for us versus Amazon is we have stores. And whereas at one stage you'd be thinking Amazon have got all this brilliant data and they're going to win, they have a big problem.
Okay, which ties back quite nicely with our previous episode of having this tandem of there's this digital space and there's the physical space.
Yes.
Operating in between.
Evolving. So if you have stores and you have the data from the stores, but you're using the customer data as well, then you have a huge advantage over pure play retailers, online only businesses, e-commerce businesses, because you've got additional data points, first of all, that some other retailers don't have, and you have additional routes with which you can use that data to communicate with customers. So it's fascinating how a store has moved from being everything to where the whole role has been questioned, but data is bringing that role of that store right back to the forefront and being critically important for 2026 and beyond.
Very interesting. I think we're getting to the end of this second part of our episode.
Have we dug deep enough into the data mountain?
I think so. The challenge is very big, very real. There's no easy route, right? There's no easy solution towards a good data strategy, but you cannot avoid looking at this subject. And maybe to wrap it up, would you have any, I don't know, recommendation for our listeners trying to keep up with what's going on in retail and especially with the data dimension?
There are many sources today, particularly again with AI, of individuals on LinkedIn, of businesses, of case studies. I think really the most important thing is just stay up to speed with what's happening out there. So looking at retailers and what they're doing, and that some of them are doing things underneath the radar, others are more proud about what they're doing, but we are in a revolution here. When the people went through the Industrial Revolution previously, they didn't realise they were going through the Industrial Revolution. It was afterwards that was named. We are going through this technological transformation revolution at the moment, which is profound, and things are being tested and tried all the time. Things will work, things won't work. So now more than ever, it's important to stay up to speed with that. And you can't go wrong by looking at some of the biggest retailers in the world, whether it's the Walmarts, whether it's the Costcos. They are all doing some fantastic things with data and retail strategies. There's a lot of good stuff happening on LinkedIn as well. Could keep you busy for 3 hours a day if you're not careful.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Steve.
Always a pleasure.
So that wraps up the second part of our episode with Steve Collinge, where we had the pleasure of delving into the future trends of retail in 2026. And in this second part, we explored the role of data in greater depth. And a few takeaways there. First, you have to start from the root of your data systems. You have to make sure that the data you use is trustworthy, it is reliable, it is structured. So that is data quality. And then you can go beyond. Once the tentacles of your octopus are trustworthy, you can try and bring these tentacles together and work on a cohesive general strategy. Another thing I take away from this episode is that there is a true revolution going on. A profound change is on the horizon, and we'll explore another dimension of this change another time, very soon, with Charlotte Ledoux, where we'll explore data governance and AI governance. Thank you very much for listening.